Hey, it's Rhonda Palzari here, and I'm excited to share with you the art journaling mini album using the Document December kit from Cocoa Daisy. Now, the base of this album is a Jenny Bolin, and I'm going to prep the chipboard so that I can paint on top of the chipboard. And I'm using a gesso layer. I'm coating both the front and the back covers, and I'm also going to use a bright white paint over top of it. It's a titanium white, and this really just makes the paint shine through for me on the background. And once that's dry, I can then paint on top of that. And I'm just going to wet a little bit so that the paint is a little more fluid on top of the mini album. And I'm going to wet the paint down just a little bit and dip into some Payne's Gray, some white, and some Prussian blue. Now you can see I'm pulling down from the top, and this is like a dry brush technique where I'm just pulling the paint down about 2/3 of the way down the cover. I want these colors to mimic the winter season here, and I just want to give it that just subtle color in the background. So I'm only doing about 2/3 down the page because the bottom half I have something special planned for it. So just play around with the colors, just add a little streaks here and there. You could do this with a variety of colors. I just like the grays and the blues and the whites. Really reminds me of like a winter's walk. Now on the bottom third of the page, I'm going to add some modeling paste or molding paste. They're both the same thing, it just depends on the manufacturer. And I'm going to smush the chipboard into this modeling paste. Now modeling paste dries the color, so it dries white. So I know this going into it, and I'm going to cover it up with some white paint. So, but if you want to just leave those chipboard letters really bold, then you want to paint into the molding paste first, and then add paint to it, and then add it to the cover. Now here you can see I'm spelling out Document December, and I thought this was a cute, fun way to add this theme into the background of my art journal. And any spot that has a little leftovers, I'm adding in the tildes and commas and the periods just as a filler, and it's a cute little filler. Now December didn't fit all the way on the front cover, so I'm bringing it over to the back side, and I'm adding in Holidays 2013 to really finish it off. Now once I get all the chipboard on, I'm going to really embed them with modeling paste or molding paste and make them part of the album and not just sitting above the album. And then you can see, really embed it, really add a thick layer of modeling paste with the palette knife. I'm using a metal palette knife because I find it a little stiffer and easier to add that in. Now, with this thick of a layer of this modeling paste, it's going to take some time to dry. So I'm going to let it dry overnight. Now don't forget, you don't have to start your cover and have it finished while you're working on your interior pages. You can be working on the cover as you work daily on the interior pages, so don't let that distract you. Once I get this all set and everything, they need to dry overnight, and I'm going to add my white over top of it. And I'm making it, again, titanium white, bright white, and that way it can just sit in the background. It almost looks like a hillside. Again, going with that winter's walk theme for my art journal mini album. Now, once that is dry, I'm going to embellish it and break up those sections. But first, I need to add some details to the top. And what I'm going to do is add this gold star, this Northern Star kind of stencil that I created for Cocoa Daisy, exclusive for Cocoa Daisy. And I'm going to use gold Faro paste from Viva Decor, and I love the way this looks because it's got that little bit of shimmer, and it really sets off that stencil really, really well. Now I'm pushing with a palette knife, and this is kind of like modeling paste, so you want to make sure you clean this stencil immediately after use, and don't forget that palette knife or you're going to have some thick modeling paste on that palette knife and ruin the integrity of it. So once that's dry, again, my strip of color really divides those two areas, and I'm just going to trim it down. Just a little tiny strip pop of color just does wonders for that cover. Once I get that on, I'm going to add a clear adhesive and then add some vintage string. And you can see it's almost like in a bow. And then on top of the bow, I'm going to add the the custom flare. It's this adorable little reindeer that he's pulling the sled, and it just looks great because it's that white background and it doesn't take over the cover. Now the interior, I showed you how to cut down pattern paper in the other video, and you can reference it, go back to it, but you'll get 3 5x7s, 1 5x5, and 1 2x7 sheets out of pattern paper. So that's tons of pattern papers. You could do 2-page spreads throughout the album, or make it 1 and 2 and mix it up. To prep the pattern paper, I'm going to do a gesso wash. So I just spray some water into the gesso and I coat the page, and you can still see in the pattern paper peeking through. I'm going to feather it out with another stencil just so it's nice, and another paintbrush just so it's nice and even coat. And once it's dry, you can see that North Pole peeking through. Just love the way that look. And I'm going to do it on the front and back of the pattern paper because I'll be using both sides in this album, and then that way my album isn't so thick. That's what I love about this. Now that's one way to prep the page. The other way to prep the page is to take some matte medium, and you're going to see it here. It's fluid matte medium is what I'm using, and I'm just going to pour it directly onto that pattern paper. Now this way to prep the page means I'm really going to see that pattern paper sticking up because it's just a clear coat I'm putting on top. Now why I do this is when I spray like acrylic paints, well, when I spray inks, or I put on acrylic paints, or I use India inks, or whatever I'm using, it doesn't bleed into that paper and ruin that pattern paper. It just kind of sits on top with like a clear coat, and you get to see this beautiful pattern peeking through. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a minute. But it's a great way to prime your papers and get them ready for this art journal. And you can do it with all the papers in the kit and get them ready to go. So I have 2 sets ready to go, one gessoed, one with the gel medium. And I'm just adding some distress paint right on top. And I'm going to blend it out with a paper towel. And then to give it just some dimension, I'm going to spray it with some water and roll the paper towel on top of it, and it really gives it that texture and that fun peeking of the pattern through it. Now here's the clear matte medium one. This is one coated with the matte medium, and I'm just going to take some Maya Road spray inks and spread it all around that page, and you still see that map, which is wonderful, but the ink's not bleeding in and ruining the pattern paper. Now since the blue is still wet, I'm going to add some little tops of the gray on top, and you can see where it spreads out and creates these cool patterns on the background. And again, I don't lose the integrity of the pattern paper because I've sealed it with that matte medium. So cool. Now, since I love those little splatters, I added them to the front of my cover just to give it that little touch of black, and it really makes it pop. On the interior cover, I added just some gold paint, and the gold paint brings that gold star all the way around. And I love the way it looks. It's just simple, and the star is the cover. Now my pattern papers, I used all this gesso and the gel medium primed papers, put them in random order. And you can see I just started to work this one. I added a photo, I added little things from the kits, there's the to-do tag, just cool little things. And I prepped all my pages and just shoved them into the book in random order. Now I have no rhyme or reason, and it may get changed up. You can see the transparency is primed, there's some gel ones, there's some gessoed ones, and I can do 1-page spreads, or I can do 2-page spreads. It's up to me, and it's up to you what you want to do. Some days maybe 2, maybe 1. But I love that I can pull them out, stitch on them, go crazy, throw them in a typewriter. I can stamp on them using the custom stamps. I can scribble on them. It just looks great. And it depends on what my art journal, what I want to do with it. And I love, love, love that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about this art journal mini album, and you checked out the other mini album using the document December. You can find more information about me at www.rhondapalazzari.com.